Welcome back. This is the second part of our tutorial series on upsetting. Check out the first video if you haven't already. We focus more on sort of decorative upsets, where they can be used and how to do them. This video is going to be much more about functional, useful upsets. We're going to show you how functional upsets can be used mainly to just add material to a section of steel. That gives you all sorts of benefits. You can turn that into scarves for scarf welding or for fire welding, forge welding, but also how you get more material available to you to do things like diamond points in this example. So this is a piece of 12mm square. We're going to be hitting this, upsetting the end, similar to the last video. But the point for this is to get material. I'm then going to use that extra material to forge into a diamond point. And with this particular one, I'm going to use a cupping tool. This is quite a deep cupping tool. And I'm going to be upsetting into this. Some people think that this allows them to upset without the material bending. But trust me, it's not the case. You will have to correct it because it will continue to bend as you're upsetting it, just as the nature of it. The benefit of using this is that you don't end up with a flat bottom to your upset, and it allows you to upset a bit more aggressively. And if your purpose is to just get extra material, then this is a great thing to use. I'm going to use this on a slightly lower anvil because of the length of the steel. So this is 2 heats now. You can see the end is slightly rounded. You can also see it's off center, hopefully. There's a slight high point here compared to down here. That's going to affect every time I try and upset. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get another short heat on it. I'm going to try and correct it with my hammer at the anvil, and then I'm going to just finish it off in that cupping tool again, just to get a tiny bit more meat and to square everything else up. Now I've got that slightly squarer, I'm just going to take it back to the cupping tool. So I hope you can see there's a lot more meat in there, a lot more material forced up. That's going to give me a lot of material to work with when I try and forge this diamond point out. Diamond points are called diamond points because I'm going to forge a square point, sort of this sort of length, but I'm going to do it on the diamond. So the faces of each of the points are going to be on the diamond of this original bar. It's just a nice kind of feature to make a bit of a deal of a nice point for a poker. So the benefit of using that cupping tool is that I can then work these surfaces and force this material out without getting what's called a cold shut at the very end. You see how the very middle of that is being pushed outwards rather than these edges forming in on themselves, creating an unwelded cold shut. I'm going to take a last heat on this and get that point down to a really nice usable point. So that's now a nice point, a very usable, more importantly saleable fire poker. The benefit of the upset is that I can get these high ridges here to create more of a sort of dynamic looking point. As you can see, perhaps the name diamond point makes a bit more sense now. But that's really only achievable if you get an upset on it first. Otherwise it tends to not look quite right. But that's a great example of where an upset is practically very helpful. So for the last example, I'm going to show you how an upset can be completely and utterly practical. In no way aesthetic. In fact, once I've finished this process, you won't even know that I've done an upset in it to start with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a scarf on the end of this piece of steel. It's another piece of the 20x8 that we used to show you the shelf brackets. And the purpose of a scarf is to be able to scarf weld when you fire weld bits of metal together in the forge. I'll show you the upset, which is a very standard upset, but then I'll show you how to put the scarf on the end of it. But basically the whole idea with this is to get yourself more material. When you fire weld, you burn away a lot of material. So you need to have a big chunk here that you can work with when you're forging two things together. So it'll probably make a bit more sense once I've put an upset on, and then I'll show you the scarf. So that's the second heat on this upset. I don't have to be as concerned about keeping it as tidy as the shelf brackets, but in theory, this is the same upset technique as the shelf brackets. You'll notice again that I've got a slight angle on the face of it, and that's fine. It's hard to correct on a piece of flat bar like this, but for a scarf, this is almost exactly what we need. I'm going to get another heat on it. This will be the third and final heat, and I'll be working here to form a scarf on the end of this, so that hopefully you can see what that begins to look like. So this is how I make my scarves for fire welding. You can see here that there's a portion of steel that's thicker than the parent material, with nice thin fingers of the scarf that narrow on this plane, ready for fire welding. This will join a second piece that's identical that will sit on top of that. And basically, once you heat this area up to a welding heat, these scarves will allow that fire weld to happen. The point of upsetting here is to get more material, so that as the fire inevitably burns through some of the surface steel, you still have enough to work with. So once you forge the two out, you will still end up with an 8mm thick bar running all along the length of it. So that's fire welded two pieces together, same stock size. So normally that's not something that you do, but just to give you an example basically of two upsets and how you can use them in a practical sense to add material to the pieces you're working. You can possibly see this is ever so slightly still a bit too thick. But if you don't upset, you're in danger either side of this weld. It's hot, so I can't really touch it. Either side of this weld of this material being too thin here and here. But because you've added upsets to it, you can have that material available for you to then forge that down to be the right thickness. So this is a great example of where upsetting is really valuable, because essentially you're adding material to a certain part of your work. So that's the upsets then. Some different examples of different uses, both aesthetic and practical. The very simple, which is things like curtain poles, just the upset ends and companion sets. So this is with a tenon on the end. Again, there's an upset in here, but added to feet, that becomes a nice looking product. You've got the offset upsets here, which allow you to do things like shelf brackets, and the more practical purpose of upsets, which allows you to add material to certain points of your work, making a poker like this, all the way to completely practical, which is these fire welds, which you're never going to see if you do it correctly. The fact that there has been an upset in there somewhere. Hopefully that gives you enough to go on why blacksmiths use upsets, what they use them for, and how they do it.